Hey, it's me, Rob Wright. I am back with another new episode of Entrepreneurial Thinkers. If you've ever wondered if you could be an effective salesperson, or if you've ever thought if you have to sell in your business, or as a founder, or as an investor trying to sell your fund, or as a founder having to sell your early visions of your product or your service, how you could be better at it, and if you're really even capable of being a good professional salesperson, because maybe you don't think you are. If you've ever had any of these thoughts, this is the episode you really want to dive into and enjoy with my friend Chris Stock, the CEO and founder of SalesMD. We not only pull apart how his team and he have been helping transform the MedSpa and health wellness industry, and helping those practices, professional practices, medical practitioners to grow the business side of their business, to grow their client base. But we also talk just a lot about sales and professional sales and relationship development. Chris is one of my favorite peers in this way, as well as being a great friend. And he shares much of the lessons that he learned early in his career at IBM, at Intel, and the 30-year career that he's had since then. And he really does help you understand how capable you all are of becoming the best salesperson version of yourself, so that you can become a good, quality, ethical salesperson, not just a cheap, sleazy salesperson like we encounter too much in our consumer lives. So if you're into this, if you're worried about this, if these are things you think about in trying to grow your business or your own firm, this is an episode we hope that you enjoy as much as we did making it. Hola, hello, hi, bienvenido, and welcome back, or welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers. This is the show where I get to talk with the most aspirational, creative entrepreneurial thinkers across all sectors and segments of society and our entrepreneurial economy. And today, super excited to be joined by a great friend, Chris Stock, to talk about entrepreneurial thinking and relationships in maybe the industry that you would least expect, the medical wellness and health industry. Chris is as wildly experienced a sales leadership expert as you can find. He spent over 30 years refining the art of professional relationship building. Heck, before I even pronounced myself a relationship capitalist, as I refer to myself on social media, I was always impressed by the fact that Chris has basically built, very similar to me, his entire career across the globe on building and maintaining sustained human relationships. He's a thought leader, a practice leader, a great teacher, a mentor who's grown from his early career leading sales and client relationships at some tech industry giants, names that everybody will recognize, IBM and Intel, where he regularly closed really complex multi-million-dollar enterprise business deals. And now bringing all those experiences to serve as the CEO and founder of SalesMD. Chris and his team are transforming the plastic surgery and med spa industries with his deep track record of boosting revenue for practices through ethical sales training. Chris's journey is literally, as I would refer to it, as a masterclass in sales excellence and unleashing the power of not just human relationships, but positive human relationships, true win-wins in your business. So, Chris Stock, wow. How are you, buddy? Welcome.
Thank you. And when you were talking, I was thinking, who is this man?
It's you, buddy. It's you.
Thank you.
It's all you. And I'm so grateful to have this conversation. We're going like I have a couple times this week. We're going West Coast to East Coast. Chris is joining us from the Tampa, St. Petersburg area in Florida, where he and his partner have recently moved. And so super grateful for him taking some time out of his afternoon. But how have you been? Well, everything's good?
Everything's good. Everything's crazy busy, which was one of my key members of staff is actually taking a vacation. So I'm actually doing some coverage as well this week. And so I was actually saying to the team, I'm actually loving it. It's sort of the grassroots stuff again, which you should never get away from. And so I'm sort of booking appointments.
The plight of a small business person, right? Is like having to juggle. I don't know that I could even try to do what we do here now in this media focused thing that we're doing, or past in our past life in the consulting business that I ran without the girls that worked for me so loyally and so successfully. Like no way I couldn't do it. So, yeah. All right, buddy. So there are 100 reasons that I could interview you, but the one that's been eating at my curiosity for frankly a few years now is this notion that you in SalesMD, you're literally, these are my words, you're turning plastic surgeons and wellness doctors and practitioners into successful entrepreneurs with growing businesses. So what I would really like to start out with is, one, why this industry? right? And then the kind of secondary follow-on question there would be, what have you found that this industry really needed when it came to growing their businesses?
So I think the first thing is, why this industry? And you may need to remind me of the second question because I
Yep, that's okay.
engrossed. You kind of know my background. So I was being corporate. When I set up my own business 15, 20 years ago, whenever it was now, it's probably longer. And, I defaulted to corporations because my background was
Yep.
corporate. I understood the corporate landscape. I understood corporate sales and corporate leadership. And so when I set up a sales training and consulting company, I went after the corporates because it was my comfort zone. And I kind of wanted to work in that space. So, Google.
And did very successfully for a lot of years.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Google was a client. I ran their first enterprise sales training worldwide. I had Adobe as a client, BMW, Symantec, NetApp, Sony Pictures, Bacardi. So that's very much the space. And with the move to Southern California, actually, I was wanting to start working with smaller businesses. And start having, again, you talk about relationship. For me, flying first class around the world with Google was fantastic. But it almost started to feel to me like a little bit of a wash and a wax, and that's not disparaging to Google or the training or anything. It just felt,
Sure.
I remember landing in Sydney, Australia. I had a 3-day workshop. I did a half-day coaching session with the leadership team. I flew out. And that was it. I don't, it was a great few days, and I know I made an impact, but there's no follow up. There's, for
Yeah.
me, and I'm not talking about from a business level. I'm talking from a personal
No,
connection.
right. I was going to say, it sounds like it's funny because you and I really never really talked about this when your practice was focused on that, but it sounds like less human.
Yeah, it was human in the moment and great experiences, but there was no longevity to that dynamic
Yeah.
between me and the coachee or the person being trained.
Right.
So I had this hankering for smaller businesses, and as you know, I spoke at San Diego Startup Week on a number of occasions.
Yeah.
And the problem with small businesses is, can they afford, to do some of these things? And they need to, but can they afford it?
Right.
And through that journey, actually, quite by chance, I was actually at Startup Week in San Diego. This lady came up to me, in effect, and said, "I want you to come and do some sales training for my team." And it's like, "What do you do?" And it's like, "I've got 5 plastic surgeons, 7 med spa
Okay.
providers." I said, "No, this is not. I do B2B." So even though
Right.
I'm looking for small businesses, it's like, "No, this is B2C."
That felt like a field too far. Like
Yeah,
that.
it was, it was. And so, she turned around and said, "Look, I wrote the guide, the Dummy's Guide to Cosmetic Surgery. I know this industry. I think you've got something different." And so we actually converted the corporate sales training into what I call ethical sales training for plastic surgeons, providers, nurses, patient coordinators, front desk.
Wow.
And we added $1 million approximately to her revenue in less than 6 months.
Wow.
And that was the start. It was like, this can, we can support each other, in
Yeah,
terms of,
no, right. I mean,
as a
you
business
saw
model.
that there was now, okay, wow, there's a sustainable revenue path for you as a business owner for
Yeah.
your business. But then you saw inside of that first example, like, oh, wait a minute, okay. So that leads me back to the following question, right? Then is and we're going to get into lots of the details of all these different tentacles of your experiences. But this first thing I want to really kind of set the table, right? So what have you found inside this industry that the industry kind of really needed? So she said, "Hey, I know the industry like better than anybody,
Yeah.
and I think you have something different." What have you found that the industry like really needed that was that you've been able to address?
So, like a lot of small businesses, they need sales. They need to learn how to sell as a technique. The challenge with a lot of small businesses, and I'm seeing this with plastic surgeons and nurses and providers, and they don't want to learn how to sell. But what's even more compounded in this industry is they're trained as medical professionals. And so, the whole notion of the word sales is another barrier to
Right.
this.
Sure.
So small
They're
business,
like, I got into this field, so I wouldn't have to go into sales. Like,
well, but this is cash-based medicine. If you don't want to sell, then there's the insurance model, and unless you work in a hospital, from what I understand, insurance is a whole different beast.
yeah.
So the successful practices embrace the notion of sales, and that's why I talk about ethical sales, because that's which in all sales should be ethical.
Sure. Should be.
I really emphasize it in this space, and what I mean by that in this medical space is medicine comes first.
Gotcha.
And it's
Okay.
my sort of stepping stone to say, look, if they're not an ideal candidate for whatever treatment that they want, because ultimately they're seeking a treatment, if they're not a good candidate for that, or they're not going to get the results, then we shouldn't be just selling them just because we can. And most 99.9999%, agree with that.
Okay.
But if they are a good candidate and they are going to buy, then our job is to make sure that they buy from this practice as opposed to walk out the door and spend their money elsewhere. And so that's the ethical sales, is medicine first, but then
I love that. It's
closing
got
the door.
it's also got a very, because we're two old B2B sales guys, like it's got a very B2B, like, hey, I'm not just going to sell the big enterprise this one deal and then not nurture the relationship and not do the follow on and not embed myself, as my old man used to teach me, right? Like, go deep and wide inside organizations.
Yeah.
That you're applying that under this moniker of ethical sales, which again, like you say, all sales should be ethical, but sometimes we need to reinforce or highlight or reemphasize the truth about something that it should be obvious, but it isn't.
Well,
That's awesome.
especially in this market, yes. That for me is because there is that extra hurdle in terms of
Yeah.
the nature of what we're selling.
Yeah, no, very much so. And it sounds like you're not asking, you're not. I mean, but it also, I would imagine, it sounds like this to them, right? As your prospective clients, as the people that you're training, you're not asking them to subjugate the thing that they are most passionate about, right? You're not asking them to become, hey, we're going to teach you how to be sleazy salespeople so you can just grow your business at the expense of your clients. No, you're actually saying, like, hey, I get it. Like, you want to be a medical practitioner. You want to value that part of the experience. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to enable you to grow that, to do more of that the better way that you want to, but I'm going to teach you some business practices along the way.
Absolutely, absolutely, and again, because so many people in this industry, and a lot of people and small business owners have a preconceived ideas to what sales is, and they don't want to be that person of what they perceive it to be.
Yeah, 100%.
They
Yeah.
don't educate themselves how to do it professionally, so they end up doing it badly. But also, sales is about being of service.
Yep.
What if you follow the model, you're understanding what is important to them,
Yep.
and then once you understand their wants and needs, as we often talk about, but what's important to them, and you've got a solution that addresses that problem, you marry the two, you're solving problems, you're serving them. And it's the same in the aesthetics and wellness industry. They have a
Yeah.
problem and you're serving. And sales is often perceived as, I've got something I'm going to sell to you regardless if you want it or not.
Yep.
Ethical sales.
In part, right, because that's how a lot of us experience the most basic entry level of sales as consumers, right?
Yes.
So when we go out into the world, the types of and the level of salespeople that we are confronted by are the rookies, are the lowest level on the rung. Oftentimes in industries where there are no ethical professional sales standards or expectations,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
So then we develop that defensiveness against that, and we think, like, I don't want to be that, until maybe you're, and this is just a little self-aggrandizement because it's my show, but like, until you're later in your life and you run into guys like you and me, right? And then you think, like, oh, like, I'd love to deal with salespeople like you guys, or I wouldn't mind being a salesperson or selling inside my business like you guys,
Yeah.
right? Because you guys are great. Like you guys do it all differently, and right, like you're not like the guy that tried to sell me the washer and dryer at Home Depot on the weekend. Well, of course not, right? I mean, that's the whole point.
And the ironic thing here as well is because we have these preconceived ideas, we don't go to get training. And so then for when we are put into a position to sell, you know, we then do all the things that we don't like and we don't
Right?
experience. We do them because we don't know any other way.
Yeah.
And,
100% true.
we become part of the problem.
100% true. All right, so let's pull on this thread for a little bit because we've got entrepreneurs, we've got business owners, we've got executives, we've got investors that listen to the podcast. And so in this context now, I want to spend a little bit of time. Let's dive deeper into just talking about sales, right? So we'll step away from the medical wellness industry and we'll come back to the medical and wellness industry a little bit. But a couple kind of historic standard questions that I just really want to get your expertise because I also want to leave people with their own impressions of this as it might relate to them, right? So can everybody sell? Like, does every business person have the ability to sell themselves or their products or services kind of buried within them? And can they learn those skills?
Yes, and yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Good salespeople are trained, they're not born. You know,
there was another question I was going to ask, but right. So we can just squish all this together and I'll pull us through it. Right. So everybody does have the potential inside them to learn the core skills to be able to sell effectively, like sell themselves, sell their products, sell their services.
Yeah.
Some are there some the old adage that always gets asked of guys like us when we meet people or in big groups, right? Is like, are salespeople born naturals or are they taught and created?
They're taught. They're all taught.
Yeah.
You know. Now there may be some attributes that you perceive that are therefore more beneficial to a good salesperson. You know, the gift of the gab. The sort of that ability to talk, the ability to form natural relationships.
But that's not necessarily, as you and I would know, and let's highlight it that's not necessarily always an indicator of
no.
Right. And also I've met plenty of great professional salespeople who by nature are more introverted, quieter, more methodical people.
Exactly what I was going to say, in today's, so, and some people you can talk, as we would say, they can talk for England. I don't know if there's a common,
we'll use that one. That's okay.
They can talk, but that means they're talking, they're not listening, they're not engaging, they're talking. And so that isn't always a good attribute. And your introverts, again, that extrovert, introvert, we often perceive salespeople are more extrovert because they like to be around people. Well, there's a lot of tasks these days, especially with technology, that's introverted based, Zooms, telephone calls, emails, putting proposals together. They're introverted tasks. They can be there on your own. So if you've not got all of those skills, you're still going, so just because you're introverted doesn't mean, I'm not going to be I'm not good at this. You're going to be good at some of the other things. And we've just got to learn the elements of it. And again,
it's skill development. I use sports as analogous to it a lot. Right. And I mean, I love basketball. You use that as a reference point, right? So if you're literally athletic enough to step on the court, right, you can stand on a basketball court and you can wear the right shorts and you can have the right shoes on and you can fundamentally know how to dribble. Okay, this is what dribbling is, right? And maybe you're a pretty good basketball player. Maybe you're pretty good offensively. Maybe you're a pretty good defense, but maybe you're a terrible free throw shooter, right? So okay, cool. Then we're going to pull you aside. We're going to literally just work on your form and we're going to take 1,000 free throws after practice and we're going to work on trying to help improve that one skill. Similarly, as you're saying, right? You have some inherent abilities to tell your story or the story of the things you're working on. You may not have all the skills. You may have some of these skills in plentitude. You may be short in some others. And if you put yourself in the position of being able to learn from qualified, capable leaders, coaches, right, teachers, you can learn those other skills that you might be deficient in, just like any other thing in life.
Yeah, it's all teachable, and like anything, I often like any teaching. It's like learning to ride a bike. You have to fall off, you have to graze your knee, you have to get a band-aid, you have to get back on the bicycle.
Yeah.
Whatever we learn, we've got to go through that. And it's exactly the same for sales. You need to understand the tools, the techniques, the methodologies, the approach, but you're going to come across situations for the first time, and that builds your repertoire of experiences. And I often, when I coach salespeople or coach sales leaders, I often say there's not a situation I have not experienced. After 30 years,
Exactly.
I've
Yes.
experienced it
Yeah.
all. But then every so often there is something new, because humans are complex
Yeah.
people. So I've experienced like it, but everyone's
Right. In a
so,
different setting, different format, different industry, different personality, whatever it might be. I'm curious what I mean, early in your career, like you worked, and this is going to date us because the younger kids listening to this show are going to be like, oh, I didn't even know that. And so I'll tell them like, hey, you should go read Thomas Watson's book about IBM because that'll tell you the rest of the story about what I'm about to refer to. But you worked inside of essentially for our generation, what was globally for like 100 years, like the most renowned sales organization in the history of enterprise companies in IBM.
yeah,
And you worked at Intel, which is another incredibly great company. But IBM had this in our genre of sales and professional salespeople had this reputation that was untouchable. It was like unlike anything else. One, what was that like growing up in that environment? And then we'll get to kind of tying it back to just sales and people's ability to learn. Like, what fundamentals did you learn there that you've carried forward with you and that you probably teach now?
in terms of my whole foundation is all based
Is
on
all
IBM.
that?
It's all
Yeah,
IBM. Nearly
yeah.
10 years in IBM. I'm ingrained. The other thing, I was I was born into IBM insofar as my father worked for IBM. So
Okay,
I
I did not know
grew up
that.
I grew
Okay,
up in the IBM world, and at that time when and of course when I came to apply, so I left college. I didn't go to university at that stage. I then became a ski instructor. Um,
nice.
and in the summer, I taught windsurfing and sailing and water skiing. But I got to sort of nearly 25. I thought, okay, I need to do something serious. And I'd vowed throughout my whole teenage life that I would never, ever, ever work for IBM because I just grew up in a way in that world.
Sure.
Um, and then I got offered two jobs. Um, when I came back from skiing, I got offered two jobs over the weekend, and IBM was paying about 5,000 more than the
There
other
you go.
job. And the other company I can't even remember, but this one, and it wasn't again because I grew up with IBM around me. It wasn't. I don't know. I just been used to it. And IBM likes to employ children of IBM
Okay.
because we know what we're getting into.
Sure. I mean, it was almost at that, and again, historical context for people, like at that, in that era, at that moment in time, the way you just described it there in that last part of the sentence is almost akin to like a government, right? So it's like we love hiring the children of
Yeah,
former foreign service officers or diplomats or government employees because they get it, like
they
they
get it.
know, right?
Yeah.
And it operated at that kind of a level.
Well, and
So how were those that early experience? How was that first couple of years like?
Well, and again, because I'd been, growing up as a teenager, I'd been into the offices,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and of course, when you're younger, it's very exciting. So um, there wasn't that sort of awe,
yeah. Okay.
in terms of it for me at the time, because again, I was so familiar with.
Did you flourish right away, like because of the exposure and the experience? Like, did you step right in and like, oh, this is me. I'm a
I,
natural
I,
at this.
I kind of knew the culture,
Yeah. Okay.
again, because again, the way IBM, if you look at say Google today, it's you get free. Well, you used to. I don't know if you're doing it these days, but free breakfast, free lunch, free dinner.
Yeah.
Some of the developers had their RVs in the parking lot. And they got up in the morning and went into the office to shower and
Very
coffee.
intense. Yeah.
And so there was IBM back then, and again, I've still got a lot of friends there, but I think it's just a matured organization now. But back then, it was the sort of the Google of this world. It was the Facebook, or or Meta. It
Yeah.
was that sort of just that solid organization that's just growing, all the time. And yeah, it wasn't really sort of,
It wasn't overwhelming.
it felt normal. But in terms
Yeah.
of, in terms of what was the first couple of years, like it was just, as I say, I took the job because it offered $5,000, 5,000 UK pounds more than the other
More.
job. And I
Yeah.
thought, I'll take it. That was, and I absolutely loved it.
That's awesome.
And the education is second to none. The
Yeah.
training was awesome. They just, they just had everything in place. Again, to another level. I remember, obviously, I went from IBM to Intel, and I was doing my MBA. And some professor would stand at the front and say, "This is how we do. This is the latest thinking in X, Y, or Z." And I would always sit there going, "Well, that's what we do." And then people going, "Well, this is not. This isn't."
Right.
I remember actually it was an HR, human resources elective, and they were talking about 360-degree feedback sessions.
You're like, yeah, this
I've been
is
doing 360-degree feedback for the
you.
last
You quickly were realizing you essentially had gotten your MBA already at IBM.
IBM and also Intel.
Yeah.
Intel can, again, another, sort of phenomenal organization.
No, absolutely. That's awesome. I mean, there's so much synergy between, and this is some new information in our friendship, right? But like mine wasn't IBM, but my dad, same thing. My dad was the career salesperson. People on the show here may reference my dad's aphorisms and mantras and ideas and things all the time. And I do it in my daily life all the time. Right. And I too, as a teen, was like, I'm not going to do what he did, right? No way, I'm not going to do that. And sure enough, I wound up like stumbling out of college and like, okay, I'll go to work for dad, right? Because it was a job and he was going to pay me slightly more than the guy down the street was going to pay me to do something completely different. And I had no idea what I really wanted to do. And then he, much like you experienced with IBM and or with that cultural exposure as a baseline, like he literally routinely like taught me. I mean, he had a whole like that first year was like a boot camp experience for me. And yet similarly, very similar to the punchline of it all is just like you do in your practice and I do in my daily life or when mentoring younger entrepreneurs is everything that I learned from him was foundational.
Yeah.
Like I've added nuance and flavor to it, but honestly, in a lot of cases, I haven't. I'm basically just repeating the 56-year-old / 2024 versions of what he used to teach me in the 1980s and what he learned in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, which is also valuable, as I'm sure you find yourself doing with your clients too. It's like we're pulling lessons that kind of prove the thesis that a lot of this is just human nature and human psychology and whatnot. And it's not so much like some newfangled thing that I got to teach you about your industry.
And if you look at it from a sales point of view, there's nothing new in the last 20, 30 years. It's the how people buy has changed because of the internet and some of how they gain information. But in terms of, again, the fundamentals, it's still needed.
Or the tools may have changed, right? But even that, like those lessons, my dad, I'll famously recount a story quickly. Like my dad back, it was like 88, 89, he bought a fax machine for the office. And at that time I hadn't come to work for him full time. I was working like part time, but it was you would have thought he had invented something, like it was the greatest breakthrough because in my dad's world, like this was, as he said then, this was the next new mechanism through which we could communicate with our clients and our prospective clients. Like, so up to that point, everything had literally been like handwritten notes or flyers or printed materials that you went and you dropped off at people's, businesses or offices or whatever. And now this fax machine was going to be this like enable us to take that same content basically, right? And just send it in a different way. Right. And then he was kind of getting out of the business and I was no longer there when it was transitioning into like email and all those things in a more robust way. But he famously told me back then, he's like, I don't care what it is, kid. I don't care if it's the pager, right? And this is all before he died, before the iPhone, right? So that gives some context. Like, but his lessons lived on because it was like a pager or a fax machine or what. That's just the latest tool. Like that's just the latest medium through which you get to build relationships with the people that you serve.
Yeah.
right? And that stuck with me. And so that's why even nowadays, I'm like, as you know, like you and I'm like, oh, WhatsApp is okay, cool. I'll WhatsApp everybody. Oh, text, we can text people. Oh, great. Oh, we can DM people on social media. Great. And people are always fascinated. Like, how do you, like, why are you always using the newest things so comfortably? And you write and you communicate and you voice note. And I'm like, because like to me, they're all just tools. I don't care one way or the other about any of them. Like, and there will be new
Absolutely.
ones, right? So that's
And the other point I
fascinating.
was going to make is we keep going forward with all this digital technology, but it doesn't mean the other technologies don't still have their place. And I recently, we were staying in Scottsdale, Arizona for a few months. And so whilst I was there, every so often I thought, oh, I'll just go and drop some leaflets off. So I'd go around the med spas, and sort of hand out the leaflets and, chat to people. And actually recently we've just signed a deal and it's come from a leaflet,
That's awesome.
and so
Because at the end of the day, it's still, no matter what is on the other end, physical, hard copy, or digital technology, it's still human.
absolutely,
There's
absolutely.
always a person on the other end of that.
Yeah.
And just a quick aside, I think I told you this when you guys were living there, but for the listeners, will find this funny to tie this all together in this little section of the show today. Where you guys were living was literally like 2 blocks from the office that I got all those lessons from my dad in. And when he would hand me flyers in 1989 and 1990 and stack them in my car and tell me, here's your map book and here's where you're going to go around in Scottsdale and surrounding Phoenix today to drop off things, it was in those same neighborhoods that you've been taking all these MedSpa flyers, right?
So we bought the same pavements.
A beautiful full circle part. All right, so little personal, but I want to uncover a little bit more of you, but I also still want to kind of tie it to the business story here. So obviously, if anybody's listening, you've picked up he's British, thus the perfect podcast voice that he has. We met originally in San Diego, as he referred to through my former business partner in my consulting company, David Baguero from Tijuana. You're joining us from South Florida. Like you talked about it before we got on air about like kind of why and how you guys have been exploring the country. But I want to go all the way back. Like, was there a reason other than just, hey, we're going to be explorers around a different new country? Was there a reason that you decided you wanted to build your business in the US? Or was the doing business in the US just a byproduct of like, hey, we want to go live in the US?
See, I've been asked this question so many times, and one day I'm going to lie.
But not today.
Because I'm going to come up with a great story as to why, because I have an MBA, so therefore, there's a lot of market research. No, the weather is better here.
There we go. Okay, and that's also why in those places that I referenced, you didn't like explore upper state New York or Chicago or Seattle, like because you had that already in the UK.
Beautiful places. I love going to visit, but in terms of living, there's a line, and we're south of it. So
there you go.
Yeah, English weather is well when the weather in England, especially London, is as it should be, and it's just perfect. For me, perfect is mid-70s, big white fluffy clouds. Everyone's on the grass squares. The little bits of grass we've got in London, and there's a buzz and everyone's happy. When it's like that, you can't beat it.
It only happens like 9 days a year. No, that's
well, yeah. My dad's favorite joke was, did you enjoy summer last year? And it was like, no, I was working that day. I think with climate, it's slightly different, but it's never consistent. So, yeah, the weather was a big factor.
There you go.
It's a great country, but I will actually say, from a business point of view, the English mentality and the American mentality is very different to business. So in England, you have to justify everything so much more and jump through a lot more hoops.
Okay, culture different, just culturally different.
So to get a deal in England took much longer. Here, there's far more of a, that sounds good, let's give it a go. If you don't deliver results quickly, you're chopped.
Sure.
But there's a propensity to do things and try things, and
that's great perspective.
It is a much, I think, a more dynamic in terms of a business point of, in terms of
Yeah.
business, that if you've got something, people give it a go. And if you deliver results, you've got a long-term client.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about SalesMD. This is your chance to kind of give us like the snapshot commercial. So talk to us about what it is, who you serve, and then what you deliver, and maybe even how you're growing.
So it comes back to a sort of earlier, so we started by doing sales training. That was our first, and that was the offer. We'll come in and do sales training.
So you had that experience with that woman in San Diego who was the expert in the industry. Like you learned there was an opportunity inside of there.
I thought,
Yeah.
but the same problem is they don't want to learn to sell, but they're happy to solve the problem. And the problem is turning a lead into a patient. And so SalesMD evolved from a sales training company into effectively a call center.
Okay.
So we now run a call center. Leads come into us, telephone calls come into the team. We're effectively the front desk of the practice, but we're also more than just the front desk, insofar as we can move that into not just a consult, but then also come back and move it from a consultation into a patient.
Okay.
And so we're involved in the sales process throughout that patient journey. And again, because I'm training the team, we know how to build relationships. We build exquisite relationships very quickly. So we represent the practice in the way that they want to be represented. And for the patient, they don't even know it's SalesMD. It's just the practice. We are the extension of the practice. And so we've taken all of that knowledge, and again, being involved with Google and other companies, and even IBM, I've been involved in the setup of call centers. So
Sure.
I know how to set up a call center. I know how to run a call center. And so I've overlaid that skill as well in terms of the training into building, now SalesMD as a contact center.
And does this make the business then more easily scalable, like your business more easily scalable? Because in the past, like either your corporate training or even the early days of this, maybe where it was like that woman's example in San Diego and more practice by practice, teaching the practices how to sell, like that's limited in its scalability, right? Because that's you on a lot of airplanes, right? Which is how you
exactly.
So is this then a little bit more predictable day to day and therefore more scalable for you as the business owner?
I've still got one corporate client, and that satisfies my need to train, and because I love it.
Yeah, you love to teach. You're a good teacher.
I love to teach. I love doing that. So I actually get it from two areas. I get to teach my team, and then I get one corporate client, and I've been with them for years. And we're just talking about a project in Vietnam and a project in India to train their teams, which is fun. So that gives me that fix of traveling, training corporate guys and girls. But in terms of SalesMD, absolutely, it's very scalable. That there's 4, 5, 6,000 medical practice, cash-based medical practices in the US, med spas,
Okay.
2,000-3,000 plastic surgeons. All of those we can serve.
Yeah.
And
you could do it again now more scale. Like you could go to an event or a conference and meet all kinds of them, and it doesn't matter where they're from. Like you could service clients in California, you can service clients in Ohio, and in Florida. It doesn't matter.
Well, we've just hired our first patient booking specialist now in the UK. So
literally, we can go do that too.
Go there.
Okay.
So we've hired her, but she's actually going to be serving the East Coast market. So she'll work her afternoon. That covers one of our morning shifts effectively. No one needs to know that she's based there. They won't come out in the conversation. It doesn't need to. But what it also allows us to do is now start sort of thinking about the UK market. At some point, we've got to enough to do here.
Yeah, no, obviously.
But
It's funny. It's funny. Those numbers you mentioned are both like, wow, that's a lot of plastic surgeons and a lot of med spa people, but then also not as many as I thought. I thought 4 to 5,000 and 2 to 3,000. I would have thought like 4 or 5 times that many. But
yeah,
it's still a lot, but it's not as many as I thought.
well, and it's really interesting. One of our biggest markets are called solo injectors. So these are nurses, providers that do Botox and filler injection. They have their own little practice. It's
Okay.
them. um,
Yeah.
and, in a number of cases, so it's not, again, it's like, you don't need to be a big practice to afford us. We've got packages right down to the solo injector level.
That's
And
awesome.
we can, in one case, we book everything,
Yeah, I mean, you essentially like I'm a solopreneur, I'm a single entrepreneur, and I hire SalesMD, and you are essentially my company. Like you're the
yeah,
extension of my business.
yeah, we do every booking,
Wow.
for this particular provider.
And profile wise, and I want to ask you in a second here, like, and we can keep the names private, but like talk about a couple of success stories. But profile wise, we go all the way from that solo injector, single entrepreneur person up to like practices, like substantial practices with multiple locations,
Yeah,
probably or something.
yeah, we've closed the deal. There's 135 practices. We're going to start with, again, we'll start small with 3, 4, but there's 35 in the next sort of year to bring on board.
Wow.
And then we were involved probably too early on, actually, with a company, but again, where they actually wanted us to take on half their staff,
Oh,
but we
wow.
needed 15 full-time operatives.
Okay. Interesting.
That was probably, it was too big. But again, the salesman in me was still
Yeah, of
pursuing.
course. Yeah, of course.
But I was.
And
We
and
both sort of
the
went quiet on each other in the end, and it was a good
yeah,
outcome.
that's probably okay. And the consumption, like the offerings, the plans, is it customized to each interaction, each client scenario, or are there kind of like here's our this package, this package, this package?
Again, it's back to that sort of what made you choose America and the weather. Again, my joke here is we spent millions on branding and we came up with bronze, silver, gold.
There we go. Right there we go.
So we got and there's actually no difference in the quality of the service. It's just the amount of minutes. So bronze comes with 200 minutes, gold comes with 715, and if you want more minutes, we just charge by minute.
There you go.
And it's all on the website because it's totally transparent.
Yeah,
And it's very simple.
it
And
sounds
so,
like it.
and again, what I'm loving about this, because again, as you picked up on as a consultant, as a trainer, it was all about me, not in a narcissistic way, but it was all about I'm the
Yeah,
product. Where
yeah,
now it's the team, actually, then there's 3 or 4 people on each of our clients to cover the hours, during the whole week. So it's really a team effort, and so actually the whole thing is scalable. So when you go on our website and sign up, as soon as you press the button and pay, you then get an email
you're right. Of
that
course,
sets your system up as a sub account within our CRM. It then sets up your telephone system. It's all automated, and it's
that's
just like
awesome.
I love it.
That's fantastic. Good for you. I just friend to friend, like good for you. Because I know, for a handful of years in transition, you had a vision like how do you design a business or this business around you in such a way that you've just described. And it was we were having conversations about this even before you found this market,
yeah,
right? Like this particular industry to focus on. But the vision was always like, how could I organize my business in this type of way? Right, to provide for the lifestyle that you aspire to have. And so to hear the whole story of not just the industry that you're focused on, but the fact that you have crafted the business in such a way that you wanted, like it's the 10-year overnight success story. That's awesome, right?
yeah. And that's absolutely right, isn't it?
that's I love it. All right, so do you have, again, you don't have to name them if you want, we can talk about them generically. Do you have 1 or 2 great client success stories that you could share with us? You talked about the lady the San Diego, the origin story woman, right? And how you added $1 million of revenue to her business in the first 6 months. They become more current day with some of these clients that are consuming the services and the call center support the way that they are now. Are there one or two that jump out that would be great illustrations?
I kind of alluded to one of them, but actually for a very different reason. So the business person, the salesperson in me is all about how do we grow revenue? How do we make you more successful? How do we do this? What was really interesting with this one lady was she was busy. And what we have given her is not, well, we've actually increased the revenue, but but marginally. What we've given her is time, and that's one of the things that probably I've matured. Actually, there's more in value than just money, and of course, when you don't have money, then that's really
no, of course.
If you've got money, then time becomes a little bit more important sometimes, and so we've reduced her, we've increased her well-being, her mental, well-being. She was incredibly stressed, incredibly overworked. I actually texted her the other day, and it's like I didn't get a response for 2 hours, and the response came back, "Sorry, I was doing a pottery class." It's like,
so you literally, I mean, you're helping her grow her business by taking off a load of the work that she didn't want to do or wasn't good at or whatever, and allow her to use the time either for herself, enrichment, or to just do more of the work that she loves to do as a result of you guys stacking her up with as many new prospects and new potential clients as she wants. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, that is actually a great success story that isn't just the obvious metrics.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what, and I think for me, that's been a really, really interesting one. And actually in a recent show, one of the aesthetic shows in Miami, I got to speak about mental well-being, as opposed to sort of standing on stage talking about.
And now you've got that example.
Yeah, and it was just really interesting in terms of having a very different dialogue. And I never thought that I would be having that type of, it's about mental well-being and, sort of your sanity.
That's awesome. No, but that's awesome. And also, again, as your friend who's known you for a handful of years, like you're a great advocate. I would love to see you talk on that kind of a topic, right? So that's people unlocking a level of value that you can provide them that might not seem apparent on the surface.
Yeah.
Which is more enriching and more rewarding for you, right? It's another depth. It taps into a little bit of that teacher part of you.
And it brings me full circle to that sort of being more involved in that relationship on for a longer period, as opposed to that wash and wax as I described it. It's you're sort of more integrated, and you feel you've done something, than just make more money, which money is an important factor.
Yeah, but it's a tool. It's a tool. When we, like you said, when we don't have it, it's the tool. It's the only tool we can focus on. It's the hammer, and everything's a nail, right? Yeah. But when you can get it to a point of stasis or stability, like then you have to. And again, I'm not going to date you, but like we're not young men. Right. We're at a point in our lives and our careers where we have to find enrichment and purposefulness in what we do. And so the fact that you've shaped it the way you have is awesome. Okay. Couple questions here at the end. And I would love to make these a bit more kind of just tactical, kind of bullet pointed answers, because we always love to try and leave folks with actionable, some takeaways that they can listen to the show on their favorite podcasting channel, or they can watch it here on YouTube. If they want to see our handsome faces, and then they can go and immediately say like, oh, wow, I'm going to try and apply those things that he or she said at the end. So we'll do, I've got two questions I want to ask you, and I'm going to kind of split one for your audience of your clients and your users, and then we'll do one kind of a bit more generic around sales. So first question, what would be two practical tips that medical clients, medical practices can implement immediately to start improving their lead conversion rates? And this would be tips beyond hire SalesMed.
Damn it. Because I was going to say hire SalesMD.
That's the first one. Hire SalesMD is the first thing. Okay. What would be two other practical tips that they could do to start improving lead conversions based on what you've seen in the industry?
So the quicker you can get to a lead, the better. So, and all the statistics show. So if a lead comes in, you want to be engaging with them within 5 minutes. the sooner you can get to them. Now, that may be impractical, in which case phone them back as soon as you can. I actually
Okay.
wanted an IV drip actually when I was in Scottsdale,
Yeah.
and I went online, found this, checked the reviews, blah 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 blah, left a message, filled in a form and left a message.
Yeah.
I think it
Because
was
you really wanted that service. Like you were like, I want to give you my money.
I want to give you my money. I want an IV. It was, and it was like nearly a day later, I get a call. Actually, I saw it come in. I thought I need this, but I was actually on the phone, on a Zoom, and I saw it, and they left a voicemail, and that was it. Call me
Yeah.
back. And it's
Right.
like, so there, what's that, $250? But,
Yeah.
spent
Right.
all that money on marketing, you've done all of that hard work to get me to phone you, and then you just blow it. So get to them as quick as you can, and be consistent in phoning them, more
Love
than
that.
once,
And
yes,
and if you
voicemail.
and if you can't do those things, if literally your practice is not set up in a way to enable you to support responsiveness at that level, then call SalesMD.
Of course, yeah, call us.
Because that's literally why you're here.
That's
And
why we
there's
do it.
super simple plans to help you do that. Because I say that jokingly, but I'm very serious because the point is some business people, some med spa or health practitioners may hear this and think like, oh, okay, I can't do that. It's not realistic for me to get back in 5 minutes or to get back and follow up the second time. Like, okay, so that's okay. The lesson there is that's okay. There are other ways to run your business then.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think the other thing is the front desk, the MAs, they're phenomenal people. They're multitasking, multiple people are coming in, they're checking them in, people are leaving, they're checking them out, they're taking payments, they're doing this, they're doing that. They're also, if they're MAs on the front desk, medical assistants, if the doctor says, can you come and help me? Of course they want to go and help. That's what they're training to do. That's what they
Right.
want. Now you ask them to make phone calls and follow up on leads. It's not what they really want to do, invariably. So they'll do it, but they'll do it, late, or they'll do it tomorrow. And, so again, recognize that. But yeah,
No, that's a great point. I mean, that also touches back to our bigger lessons on sales we were talking about before, right? Is like if you put people wrong butts in wrong seats, right? If you put people into roles or pursuits that they're not interested in or that don't serve their bigger purpose, like they're probably not going to be very good at it, right? And they're probably not going to do it very well. And so then that then begets the bad spiral of bad experiences, and then it spirals. So with that, this is actually a perfect segue to my last question, which let's just talk generic career advice, right? So what would be 2 or 3 pieces of career advice that you would give to someone who is starting a career in sales today in any field or industry? Like, so you meet a young aspiring salesperson or older salesperson who wants to get into sales. What are 2 or 3 pieces of advice you would give them?
this would also apply to the front desk. There are 2 things based on the research and also based on what you and I have seen over the years that separate the best salespeople from the rest. The ability to ask questions and the ability to listen. That's what the research shows. That's what you and I know. That's it. Sales comes down to asking good questions and listening. And I hate it, but you got 1 of those and 2 of those, which has been on every single sales training program I've ever been on.
My dad would be very proud that you just said that instead of me.
It's so true, and I just my eyes roll myself. So, but
it's true, and it's also an easy thing for people to attach to and go like, oh, that's true, we do that.
Yeah.
I do have that.
Yeah, ask good questions, listen, and then again, the other piece then is what, when, why, who, where, and when. Was it that? So open questions. So if I just, a quick example, if I said to you, Rob, is the weather good where you are today? Yes or no? I don't have any information about the weather. You could say, yes, it's good. And I go, in my mind, good means
something different than it might mean to me.
Exactly. To me, it's like mid-70s, white fluffy clouds.
I mean, and ironically, it is exactly that today here. So
perfect. So it's good. But for others, it's storms. People have
Hey, it was 90 to 100 degrees about a week and a half ago here for like a week, and I have friends who love that.
Yeah.
Right. And then I was like, I'm not going outside. Like that's right.
Exactly. So if it's is the weather good? Yes, no. You don't elicit any information. So the other question is, what's the weather like there today? How are you finding? What do you think about the weather today? That's eliciting information. So what, when, why, who, where, and when. Those questions open. They create a dialogue, and they get going. So I want questions, listen
and listen better. I want to tack an extra bonus question onto the end of this one before we finish up. Would you encourage someone if they came to you and said, like, I'm thinking about going into sales? Like, would you encourage or discourage that today?
I'll encourage everything.
Why would you encourage it?
It's where the tire hits the road. In everything we do in life, there's a deal, a sale. It's a commitment. Getting married, it's a relationship. Professional sales is about understanding the other person more than you understand yourself. It's about understanding who they are. If I spend an hour, I get passionate about this, but if I spend an hour talking about me, we go for a drink and I spend an hour talking about me, what do you think? I let you permeate those words. If I spend an hour talking about you, who are you? Tell me about you. Tell me about your life. How does that make you?
You're literally the greatest guy ever. We're going to be friends forever.
Exactly. So sales is everything. It's, think of it as a way of communicating. It's about understanding their point of view before understanding your own. And in sales, you're marrying, their problem to your solution, and you can only find that out by asking questions and listening to their answers.
100% agree, buddy. You are, aside from myself, which I can't give the prize to myself, right? So you're aside from me in my life, the last 25 years, like the most accomplished professional salesperson, professional relationship developer that I've had the good fortune to become friends with. I'm grateful for our friendship. I am especially grateful that this conversation happened today. I felt like it's like years in the making. But just trying to organize it this last couple of months has been fun. So I'm grateful for your time. Thank you for helping me understand what fed my curiosity around the industry that you're so successfully focused on now. And then just on a personal level, I'm just excited for you and Paul, and I'm just stoked that you're happy and that you are you are now manifest. You've built the business that you were designing in your mind for so many years.
Yeah.
And now you get to reap the benefits of it. So this is a blast. Thank you for spending some time with me today.
Well, thank you for having me on your show. And I've watched a number of episodes, so to sort of make it onto your show, I feel honored. So thank you.
Awesome. You are, as you may have heard, or we say it occasionally, you're no longer just a guest on the show. Now you become an alumni. You're an alumnus member of the community. You now join the pantheon of the 120 some odd other great, amazing, really talented, aspirational, entrepreneurial thinkers and people who we're fortunate enough to know. And Lord knows if any of them can ever help you succeed in any way, just tell us. And obviously, I suspect I'm going to get some people in our community that are going to hit me up and say, like, hey, how can I meet Chris? Like, I think I would love to talk to Chris about what they're doing. So thank you for becoming part of the community today.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did recording it. As always, we thank you so much for listening and watching. Today's show was recorded here in Los Angeles and produced by the incomparable Deanna Bernal in Mexico City. We can only grow this show by you listening and sharing the show with friends. So please find, follow, subscribe, and share our audio-only show on Spotify, Apple, or via any other popular podcasting platforms, as well as find the video version of our show now available on our YouTube channel over at Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And of course, you can follow along on our various social media platforms for fun and informative clips and content at Entrepreneurial Thinkers, wherever you can find us. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at I Am Rob Ryan on just about any social media platform. Gracias, thank you, and have an awesome day.